This is Democracy Now!, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez as we look now at the dire conditions incarcerated people in Texas faced as they were left for days in their cells, often with no heat or running water during last week's winter storm that overwhelmed Texas's deregulated energy grid. At the Federal Medical Center Carswell, Fort Worth Star-Telegram reporter Kaylee Johnson reported more than 1,000 women held there finally got heat Friday after nearly 6 days of freezing, though the Bureau of Prisons disputed this. One prisoner told The Intercept sewage water was everywhere in the facility, which has also been hit hard by COVID-19 and houses whistleblower Reality Winner, who tested positive for COVID in July. Reports are also emerging from immigrant jails of solitary confinement cells with no heat. Texans locked up in city and county jails accused of crimes but awaiting trial, unable to post bond, also suffered. This is Brandy S., who's jailed in Bowie County, describing conditions there in a call recorded Thursday by the Texas Jail Project.
Are not receiving any tissue. I'm in a pod of 19 women. They came up here and gave us 3 rolls yesterday. Well, haven't given us any soap since 2 weeks ago almost. Laundry has not came at all, and we're completely out of pads. We've had water, but the heat in our particular dorm has been out for days. The only way that we are regulating our temperature is the dorms that are beside us. Their heat, I guess, is working, and it's like filtering over through the bars into ours, but it has been cold. They give us 2 blankets when we get here, but they have not offered us any extra blankets since the weather has hit.
That was Brandy S., jailed in Bowie County. In Houston at the Harris County Jail, the 3rd largest jail in the United States, at least 1 man was reported dead last week as men shivered in overcrowded cells, many sleeping on the floor next to overflowing toilets. Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez described the jail last month as, quote, bursting at the seams. And this was last month, before the storm. He'd already warned of a potential health crisis. Across Texas, officials said 33 prisons lost power, 20 had water shortages. For an update on all of this, we go to Houston, where we're joined by Keri Blakinger, staff writer for the Marshall Project, the publication's first formerly incarcerated reporter. Her latest piece is headlined, Inside Frigid Texas Prisons, Broken Toilets, Disgusting Food, Few Blankets. In it, she shows several photos of the kind of food prisoners have been forced to eat and describes the, quote, increasingly pitiful meals, including one that was nothing but a small piece of cornbread, a half a piece of cheese, a handful of raisins, and a hot dog with no bun or ketchup. Keri, welcome back to Democracy Now! Describe what took place over this last week.
Well, Texas prison conditions have gone from bad to pretty dire, I would say, in dozens of units. For some prisoners, I think this is a little bit like Harvey all over again, but the problems are probably definitely more widespread this time. Once the power started going out in the free world, we started seeing this happening in prisons as well. Prisons didn't really have the sort of infrastructure going into all of this that many people do in the free world. So we're seeing places that already had trouble heating things adequately. There's been longstanding issues with a lack of air conditioning in the summers, and every winter we hear these same complaints about lack of heat or very uneven heat, because in a lot of cases, even if the heat is working, the ductwork is shoddy and old, so it simply just doesn't get anywhere. And that's all before a storm. So then you have a storm, you lose electricity in several units, you lose water or water pressure in several units, you have overflowing toilets, you have, I was hearing reports of units where they have 4 toilets to 100 and some men, and on a good day, that's not enough, and then those toilets don't work, and, the conditions get bad pretty quickly. We heard about men taking snow from the roofs to try to flush the toilets, but of course there's just not enough snow to deal with thousands of men. And then, there's the food on top of that. As you mentioned, I've gotten some pictures of what the meals look like, and, they're clearly just not enough to support grown people. And these are meals that are not your daily prison fare. This is what happens when there are lockdowns, because the food tends to get worse during lockdowns. They're given bagged meals. And, when there's not enough staff to help coordinate these things, these bagged meals end up looking sadder and sadder. And it's just clearly not adequate.
And Keri, what kind of oversight or minimum requirements are there by state officials on these prisons? For instance, are there any requirements for them to have emergency generators or backup systems in case of power failures?
I don't know if there's a legal requirement for it. There's not as much oversight in some ways regarding prisons as there are regarding jails. The oversight for prisons just sort of falls to the agency and to state legislators. But the fact of the matter is that we have roughly 100 prisons, and that is expensive. So we have, we have a lot of infrastructure and equipment problems. We don't have working fire alarms in most prisons. Like when we do have generators, which, they do have generators, they don't always go on as planned. And even if they do, the ductwork is problematic at best. So it's not so much that these things don't exist, it's that they're often just not functional.
And in terms of the situation in county jails, are you familiar or have a sense of what's been going on there?
Yeah, so in Harris County, which is where I live, this is the, biggest jail. There's about 9,000 people in the jail there. We're hearing a lot of these same, fairly dire complaints. But here, I think it's worth noting that the sheriff has been, has been out and saying that this jail was going to be a problem. Like, he has been trying to get the population reduced and has been having issues with the judges and the state and prosecutors, trying to work with them or, work against them, whatever the case may be.
I mean, he sued, didn't he, Keri? He sued to get the population reduced, the sheriff.
He's been vocal about this before COVID and during COVID. And, I think he'd be the first to say that, well, he has been the first to say that this is a problem. And, one thing also about the jail here is that they actually managed to get some people vaccinated as a result of this, which I thought was, I would say a silver lining, but it's such a bad situation. I hate to say that. But they actually managed to get around 900 people vaccinated with vaccines that would have gone bad because of the loss of refrigeration when electricity went out elsewhere. So that's something that I haven't heard happening else in other jails or prisons, people getting vaccinated as a result of the power outages. But, I think it does show sort of where the sheriff's interests lie in terms of advocating for the people in his jail.
Is it true? We heard Carswell, the federal prison where reality winner is, they actually didn't lose electricity but didn't want to turn on the heat so that it wouldn't be said that only prisoners get heat in Texas?
I haven't gotten any indication that that was true. I've heard plenty of complaints about the conditions. That I've talked to, families and friends and lawyers of people who were in there. The thing is, if you turn off the heat, the staff has an incentive not to turn off the heat because then they have to work in those conditions. What I have heard is that it took a while for the heat to, be functional enough to make much difference, and that there were places in the facility where the conditions varied quite a lot. Like some places in the facility had longer power outages than others. So I haven't gotten any confirmation about that.